is season 3, episode 1, Natalie. So we are so honored to have you grace this episode 1 of season 3. And Part of Women is conversations we have with female business leaders and change makers with the intent of inspiring a new generation of African leaders, female leaders for sure. And this Part of Women actually stemmed from Impact Africa's belief, which Natalie, I'm sure you can agree with, that women are much more effective at leading and nurturing people-centric systems. And startups are essentially the people-centric systems of our day, right? So Impact Africa Network is our startup studio based in Nairobi, where we get to get college graduates, recent college graduates, who then are able to be transformed, get to transform into creators and owners. And today we have them right here and a few more people. So they will get, I'm sure you'll get a chance to know more about us as we go on. We do 12-month innovation fellowships, and people, the recent graduates are able to work on well-vetted ideas with the guidance of a great leadership team and a mentorship network. And the goal is to develop innovation leaders and to launch startups, right? So I'm going to let my co-host introduce herself and also to read her bio. Yes, welcome, Mariguru.
Thank you so much, Vicky. My name is Modesta Waruguru. I am a finance associate at From Here Ventures. From Here Ventures is actually a venture fund based in Nairobi that actually invests in early stage startups, basically. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, Natalie. Your profile is quite impressive. Natalie is the managing partner at Norrsken22, responsible for the overall management of the fund, and the fund is actually based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Natalie brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in private equity and growing and growth investing at Norrsken22, and that's because she spent about 18 years in Actis, which is one of the leading private equity funds focused on investing in emerging markets. Natalie, that's quite the profile. We are grateful for taking time to speak with us today and inspiring so many young leaders in our audience. Probably you could tell us more, a little bit more about yourself, as well as how you got into private equity, as well as the investing industry in general.
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe just to take a step back. And first of all, thank you very much for having me here and the very kind words. The new fund that we've just launched this year, Norrsken22, is actually it's a Pan-African fund. So it's not based in Johannesburg, although I'm based in Johannesburg, although I'm currently in London. But the fund is a Pan-African fund, and we actually do have an office in Kenya, and one of our partners is based there. So we're investing mainly in Kenya, Nigeria, and in South Africa. How did I get into private equity? I'm going to say it was by mistake. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I left university knowing I didn't even know what private equity was, and It was a little bit by mistake. At one point, I thought to myself, wow, that looks like a really cool job to have, really interesting job. And I actually said it to the guy that I was dating at the time, I'd love to do private equity in emerging markets. And he said to me, you can forget it because you need about 5 degrees and, all that. And at the time, I didn't have that. I think there is something to be said about verbalizing what your dreams are, because a year later, that's exactly what came across my path. And similarly with this fund now, the Norrsken22 fund, about 6 months before this opportunity came in front of me, I said to my husband, I would love to, because obviously I was the global head of private equity and I was managing a lot of money and having to fly from Brazil to Beijing, and really just wanted to come back to the continent and do something a bit more manageable. And I said to him, I'd love to do a $200 million fund in Africa, and 6 months later that came across. So it sounds a bit ethereal and magical, but I do have, a strong belief of saying if you want something and you put it out there, the universe does often, because your brain is thinking about it, and when the opportunity comes, you recognize the opportunity and you go for it. So yeah, I mean, I think I've been very lucky and privileged along the way, but I think a lot of it's, when you do put yourself out there and are deliberate about something that you want to do, often the opportunity will come past you.
Interesting. I like the idea that you have to put your mind into something for you to even be able to attract whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So that's quite insightful. Yeah.
Natalie, really, you've actually made me laugh today when you say you forget about it, you need to have like 5 degrees, but I can see that you were not deterred by that comment, which I'm sure is such an encouragement for everyone here. But I also must mention today, Natalie, that we have our founder and CEO, Mark Karake, who is on the call with us today, and I'm sure you'll get an opportunity to meet him when we get to the breakout rooms at the end of the session. So we will do that at the end of the session. So Natalie, going on to the second question, as managing partner of Norrsken22, which is on a quest to invest in tech hubs in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Ghana. Tell us more about the opportunity that exists in raising growth capital for African startups and why these named countries were attractive for this mission.
Yeah. So, Victoria, I think on that one, that's a relatively easy answer. I mean, when we were looking to do a tech growth fund for Africa, if you have a look at where the tech activity is, it's in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Egypt. Those are the four countries where between 80 and 90% of all the tech activity happens. So if we're wanting to invest and we're wanting to back the companies that are doing tech, we need to be in one of those, in those 4 countries. And we decided to focus on sub-Saharan Africa first. I think we will look at Egypt in a future fund, but just, given that it was our first fund, we wanted to focus on sub-Saharan Africa. And therefore, it was pretty obvious to be in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. And that is not unusual. I mean, if you have a look at what happens in the rest of the world, tech hubs, tech develops around hubs. So you've got Silicon Valley, you've got Stockholm, you've got London, you've got Berlin, Singapore. It does tend to develop around tech hubs, and those countries are the ones that have cropped up. So hence the reason why we've got a team in each of those markets.
Right. Okay, so I guess that was not very hard for your fund to invest or start with. So I'm going to ask you about your thesis, which is your focus area is on investing in startups growth phase rather than the seed stage.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so so first of all, my background is more growth. So, 2 of our partners come more from the growth side. And then our other partner who's in Nigeria comes more from the seed and early stage stuff. So it's 2 teams coming together. But if you have a look at the opportunity on the continent, there's quite a lot of capital and fund managers that are in that seed and pre-seed. But the moment businesses need more capital, $5, $10, $50 million checks, the universe of investors shrinks very quickly. So that's where we saw the gap. And if you speak to Lexi when she was in the seed and pre-seed rounds, in the companies that she was in, the moment they were looking for their A and B rounds, the universe shrunk quite quickly. And often what has to happen is those companies have to go overseas. So they're going to Silicon Valley, they're going to the US, they're going to Europe to try and raise the capital. So we very much saw a gap in the market there to have an African-based, African-run fund that could support companies beyond that seed and pre-seed round.
Right. Okay. So I'm guessing you wanted to have these companies not look for outside help, let's say that, but more for someone or a company that understands the African ecosystem and things like that, right?
Yes, and I think there's a lot of all the businesses that we're investing in are generally their next stage of growth is to look beyond their current borders. So if for example, if we're investing in a Kenyan company, and they want to grow. Often the two countries that they look at is Nigeria and South Africa. If you're looking at a Nigerian company, where do they want to grow? Kenya and South Africa, because those are kind of the beacon economies of sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of the economic activity happens. So this is exactly where we can help them and say to them, well, if you're a Nigerian company looking to grow into South Africa, I can help you with that. Or, Getho, who's our Kenyan colleague, can help companies grow into Kenya. If you're a Silicon Valley-based investor, you cannot help with that. You can help with other stuff. You might be able to help with the tech stack, or with access to networks in the US if that's relevant. But if you're an African company looking to grow in Africa, you need locals to be able to help you with that growth. And I think that is where that is a unique advantage that we have to offer founders.
Wow, Natalie, you couldn't have said it better. Thank you.
Okay, so I actually saw a report not too long ago, a report by World Bank talking about only 3% of all female teams have gotten funding from the venture world, which is a significant gap when you compare it to the 76% all male team getting funded left, right, and center. What do you think are some of the things us in the venture world need to change in order for us to see more all-female teams getting funded as much as all male teams are getting funded?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of issues and answers to that question. I mean, first of all, I don't think that there is a lack of capital available for all female, teams. So, and there's quite a lot, particularly in the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years. There's a focus on gender diversity, and there are funds that will only invest in women funds. So the capital is there. Now the question is why is that capital not finding the home? A couple of things. I mean, first of all, if you're looking at, depending on the type of capital, but if you're looking at big external capital that's looking to come in, if you're a big venture capital fund, or any private equity fund, your focus is on scalability. So you want businesses that can scale. So the type of business that you're looking to back is a business that can scale in within country, but also regionally and potentially even globally. So, a lot of the time that we see is the types of businesses that are all female founded are not necessarily businesses that can scale like that. They're more potentially lifestyle businesses of, within the beauty industry or within the fashion industry that isn't really possible to be able to scale beyond the border. Whereas a fintech business can scale beyond it. So the capital comes, you might find an all-female team, but the type of business that they're in doesn't attract the capital that they want, because the profile of that business is not able to scale. I mean, I think the other thing that we also need to look at is you actually need to take a step even back from that and have a look at, when girls are coming out of school, right? We have to encourage our girls to take maths, to take science, to take accounting, to take computer science, all the way through to matric. And then when they're going into their tertiary education, to continue that. Because, it's only when you're going down a certain chute that you have that ability to then be able to launch a venture capital tech company. If you don't have that history, it's quite difficult. It's not impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just harder. So again, making sure that we make, tech interesting and exciting for girls that are in school to be able to, have that grounding, so that there's more of them coming out of school that are able to launch these businesses that can attract capital. So it is. I don't think there is a supply problem when it comes to capital. I think it's more the funnel is not producing enough women or all women teams for the capital to be able to find them and the right type of opportunities.
That's an interesting point, and it kind of brings in one of the startups we have here at Impact Africa, which is Jenga School. Jenga School, especially the CEO at Jenga School, her main focus is to ensure that there are 50,000 women in the innovative space, women who can be able to build stuff and all these great things. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing a change when it comes to women who are in those big positions, the building positions. So it's definitely something to look out for. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic. I love the sound of that. We need more of that.
Yeah.
Right. Natalie, you've mentioned something quite interesting, and I think I just want to go back to that very quickly. It's on more on a light touch. you say that we should make tech interesting for girls. How would you do that, you as Natalie, make tech interesting for girls?
So first of all, I think it starts with role models. If there are women out there that are, that are more senior, that have got, that can present themselves as role models to younger women or young girls, I think is really important, because when girls are sitting in school and they kind of look at an industry and they don't see anybody that represents them, it can scare them off, right? And it can be intimidating. So I think more women that are coming through the system, the more the women come through, the more they represent a role model, the more it kind of talks to young girls saying, well, if Natalie can do it, then I can do it. Why not? So I always, and that's why, when you ask me to speak on this, I do it with love, because it does. I think more women that are able to present that kind of role model it's great. And to the extent that we can help, that's what we should be doing. But it's also going all the way back. You have these pitching competitions, for example. Like She Loves Tech. I think that is really a fantastic. Those type of things, and supporting those type of things where you really are focusing on women and girls coming through. Then people will then gravitate towards that. So, and the example that you used earlier, those are the type of things that I think get girls thinking about it, and going, oh, actually, that is available to me, and really making it accessible to them.
Right. That's so true. And, even you coming on this platform, when we are talking about power to our women, and we girls and women can see how much you've achieved in your lifetime. And this actually goes to my next question, where I know that you've been a leader in a male-dominated industry. And I know that you might have experienced some biases in your career lifetime. And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So Victoria, I probably split that question in two. Have I experienced biases or felt not included in the workplace or in a meeting or whatever? Absolutely. But I think probably every single person on this call has got an experience of that. Everybody at some point in their career, for whatever reason, will feel that there's a bias towards them, that they haven't been included in the way that they should, that they might have been, not included. I think the world is getting better at that. I think the world is becoming a lot more conscious of those type of comments. Whether it's based on gender, race. There were comments made to men who leave the office early to go and do childcare. They will have biased comments made to them as well. So everybody, I'm sure, would have experienced that kind of bias, and I think that kind of realization or that people are becoming more aware, I think it is good. But at the end of the day, you also just have to, if you take all of that on board and you take it really personally, and oh my goodness, the world's against me, you also just have to develop a thick skin and move on. If you have to take every little comment and thing personally, you're going to end up not moving anywhere. I used to, you just kind of throw it off and carry on, right? So from a, that kind of bias or exclusion, you have to, have a rhino skin and push on through. The second part of that question is, do I feel like that my career has been stunted because of the fact that I'm a woman? The answer to that is absolutely no. And the reason why is because I have had phenomenal bosses, and all of them were men, that wasn't by design. I just have never had a female boss. So I can't even say that, I had a boss that kind of looked but every single one of them have been completely supportive of me and my career and have been phenomenal, mentors. And that is probably a piece of advice that I will give to anybody, particularly, I think the audience here is more startup, so it's slightly different. But if you're in a career and you do not have a supportive boss, my answer is move. Just move on. Because if you do not have somebody who is your mentor and somebody who's your sponsor within the organization, it doesn't have to be a verbal thing like, are you my sponsor? But just that someone's got your back. It's very difficult to move within that organization. And the moment you're feeling that you're having to paddle that boat all by yourself and you don't have a sponsor, and I'll say this to anybody, male or female, move and find somebody who is going to support you.
All right. Thank you so much, Natalie. So always look out for people who are supporting you in your journey, whether you're male or female, right? Okay, so going back to Norrsken22, I'd like to ask you something about your risk management strategy. Are there any bad investments that you guys have ever made, and how do you bounce back and recover from losses? And just before you answer, Natalie, if anyone in the audience would like to ask any question, you can please send them to me, and then I will be asking them. Go ahead, Natalie.
So in Norrsken22, we've only made 2 investments, and we only literally just kicked off. So we kicked off on the 1st of February. So thank goodness none of them have gone bad yet, because that would be really bad. But
right,
I think your question around risk mitigation is an important one, and the first thing that we look at from a risk mitigation strategy is alignment with the founder. People will go, oh, well, what documentation, and do you have control, and all that good stuff. If you're looking at documentation to try and control a business, you've lost the plot. It's all about making sure that the person that you're backing, the founder that you're backing, the management team, the company that you're backing is aligned with you from a values perspective. Are they people who are going to be doing business properly, with the right governance, with the right compliance, and with the right attitude to being able to do work? If the moment that the times that I've seen investments go bad is when there's misalignment there. Misalignment from a values perspective, that they want to do things in a dodgy way or in a slightly different way, or to cut corners, and misalignment from a strategy perspective. So upfront, that's the conversation that we have. We spend a lot of time diligencing the founders and understanding whether there's a heart-to-heart that that there's that connection. Because once you are aligned with your founder, then you can go through a rocky road. Something might happen in the market, the currency might blow up, you might be able not get your supplies. But if both of you are working together, you will be able to overcome pretty much any obstacle. The business might not perform as well as you may have thought, but at least you can get through it if you're aligned with the founder. So by far, the biggest risk mitigation strategy for us is to be aligned with the founder and make sure that we're aligned from a values perspective, firstly, that they share the same values that we do. And yeah, as I said, it's easier to bounce back and recover from a downturn or a bump in the road if you are standing shoulder to shoulder with your founder and you're able to push through that together.
Okay, right. So alignment with founders, that's the most important thing in terms of your values. Has that been something hard since February, of course? Is that hard to find? Is that something hard?
No, I'd say the answer to that is no. I think I'd say most of the founders that we meet are, these are great people. They're entrepreneurs. They're looking to build their businesses, and they just want somebody to help them, and that is hopefully where we can come. And so I'd say very seldom do we find a founder where we kind of sit back and go, hold on one second, this doesn't feel right to us. And also because of the stage that we're investing in, there will be other, there would have been previous earlier stage venture capital funds that would have come before us. And normally during that time, those founders would have been found out and weeded out, and moved on, So it's not a foolproof, we spend a lot of time, with the founders, but no, I think in general, most people are, good people who want to do it, who just want to kind of build a successful business, and that's where we look to partner with them to help them do that.
Right. So, but also the stage that you fund is better because the
slightly more de-risked. Yeah, slightly more de-risked. Obviously, if you're coming in at the seed round, you don't have a history with that founder, and there's no history to see. Yeah. And I know a lot of seed and pre-seed VC funds like to see founders who are second-time founders for exactly to mitigate that risk, and you can see that they've got a track record. But yeah, the risk obviously reduces the longer the person's been in the system, in the system for.
All right, thanks, Natalie.
Yeah, definitely nuggets of wisdom we're receiving here. You have to be aligned with the founders you'll end up eventually working with. Most important is building that connection, because you don't want to have a founder who you will end up clashing a lot, and then you don't get too much value out of that. Natalie, I'd like to discuss something that has currently been happening in the market, and which is the down rounds of valuation we've been currently seeing. So maybe 18, 24 months ago, you'd find companies valuing themselves at 100 million and they're able to raise. But with this time round, those companies need to kind of take the valuation down in order for them to again be able to raise. How are you guys dealing with that current state of the ecosystem currently the way it is?
So obviously for us, we've got capital to invest, so we're actually quite happy that the valuations are coming down, right? Because hopefully it means that we can enter at a more reasonable valuation. So yes, I mean, I think this investments, these cycles happen. There's an inflation of capital. They come down, it goes up, it comes down. I mean, that's the way that the world works. And I think people were starting to get worried that the valuations were getting a bit too frothy in Africa. I mean, certainly it was a conversation when we've been fundraising. It was something that we were having to talk through with our potential LPs, because there was a worry that the valuations were getting frothy, and that we would be coming in at that kind of high level. So the fact that the valuations are starting to drift into a more sensible territory, I think is a good thing, because also when valuations are too high, capital steps back. And that's not helpful, for anybody in the ecosystem, So what you want the valuations to be at a sensible level where people coming in can make money, people coming out of the system can make money, without these kind of big, troughs and dips ups and downs. So, what's happening in the market obviously is, if you're fundraising like we are, it can be a little bit difficult because people are like, what's going on? Our valuation's going to go down. But I think most investors that come into funds like ours are long-term investors, and will have seen these cycles play out before. And the fact that we are starting out on our investment journey, it certainly plays into our hands personally. I mean, if you're a fund that's exiting, that's a different story, because you might be exiting when the valuations are softer. But certainly for us, that we're in the investing process at the moment, having softer valuations it can only be a good thing for us.
Yeah, definitely a good thing for the funding people. But what effect do you think it will have, especially for the founders who will have to accept a lower valuation? How will that affect them, especially mentally? Yeah.
So, when we're talking to founders, on the valuations of businesses, I think it's really important that founders don't chase the highest valuation at every round, because for exactly this risk, right? Having a nice and steadily going up valuation, that's what you want. You don't want these massive big jumps and then suddenly you have a down round. That's suicide in the venture capital community. You want to put out realistic numbers, you want to hit your numbers, and you want to keep your valuations, slowly ticking up. If there's these wild swings, that's when investors get very scared off. So when we're speaking to founders and they're putting out these crazy valuations, we always say to them, look, be careful about doing this, because what you don't want is a down round. Rather be conservative, take a little bit less capital, or take a slightly lower valuation. You might dilute a little bit more, but rather do that and stay on and have a good story to sell at the, when you do your final strategic exit, rather than trying to kind of do headlines. Because, interim valuations is like, it's a bit like, it's not necessarily that real to the founder, because they're not taking money off the table. It's a bit, it's more kind of an ego thing, right? To say that you value the business at X. But from a real money-making perspective, it's not, founders don't often take money off the table during the rounds. It's only really when they exit. And at your final exit, you want to be able to tell a story of consistently meeting your numbers and consistently having a valuation that's ticked up over time.
Mm-hmm. All right, I guess that makes sense. When you look at it at the company level, what effects do you think that will have at the very company level? What are the specific impacts of this down round? Yeah.
At the company level, not necessarily. The operations is not going to be affected by, by a down round, as long as the company can get the capital. If they can get the capital coming in and the capital is available for the operations, for them to do whatever they need to do, rollouts, etc. Obviously, if the company is struggling to get the capital, and then your growth starts stagnating. That is a problem. But I suppose the value at some point an investor will be interested if it's a down round. So it can affect the morale of the business and affect the morale of the CEO. And I think probably more importantly, the senior management is running around trying to raise capital and their eye is not on the operational ball. Their time would be split. So they're kind of being distracted by a capital raise could have an impact on the business operationally. So, again, if you're just kind of steady as you go, going up the valuation, steadily stepping up your valuation and not going for a crazy number, your ability to raise capital quicker is also helpful, which means you can raise the capital and then focus your attentions on the business again.
Yeah, definitely something to learn about for us guys who are building businesses, not necessarily chase the valuations out there, but focus on the building the business. The right money will come at the right time. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Natalie, we have a few questions from the audience. One of them is from Waruriru Ndungu, and she is asking, would you say the fact that most funding is going to tech startups in sub-Saharan Africa is a kind of bias in itself, seeing as even the non-tech startups are solving crucial problems despite the fact that they may not scale as much as tech startups?
So the thing with capital is fluid, right? Capital goes where capital makes money. There is capital out there that is more developmental focused, that is more impact focused, and that capital will have a slightly different lens. But if you're looking at purely commercial capital will go where the returns are. And where most investors are seeing where returns in Africa now are is in the tech space. And there's a reason for that. If you have a look at the world, the whole world is digitizing, the whole world is going online. So that is a global trend. So businesses that are in that space will naturally attract more capital because that's where the global trend is. And because the world is moving in that direction, those businesses tend to grow faster than businesses that are in kind of more traditional businesses. Secondly, COVID has accelerated that. So, where pre-COVID sending your child to school online was, people were like, I'd never do that. Going to a doctor virtually, people were also like, how do you do that? COVID happened, suddenly that became the norm, right? No doctor wanted to see anybody. Everything was done online and all children were having to go to school online. Now, the world is like, well, actually that works. How can we do that going forward? So you can see there's this like paradigm shift to online and to a digital world. So businesses in that space are naturally going to grow faster and quicker. And the other thing about that growth is digital businesses are able to grow exponentially. Because you're able to, through an online environment, bring customers in a lot quicker than you would in a kind of bricks and mortar offline world. It takes a lot of time and effort to kind of build a school, so that you can fill it with 200-300 students. To put 200-300 students online, you can do it like that. Within a heartbeat, you can have your students online and listening to one teacher doing a maths class, whereas you don't have to physically build it, capacitate with physical teachers in that school. So you can see how digital businesses can just grow faster and exponentially versus a bricks and mortar business. And again, growth attracts capital. So that's where the capital, will flow. And the other big benefit that Africa has is that, 60% of our population in Africa is below the age of 25. So you've got this huge population of youngsters who are all basically born with a mobile phone attached to their palm and, it never leaves their hand, right? They're doing everything digitally. And that is the generation that is coming through, through the ecosystem. They're doing everything digitally, whatever it might be there. And again, that's also fueling growth in that tech space. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bias. It's just capital goes where capital can see there's a money-making opportunity. And that is where, at the moment, that's where the money-making opportunity is. It doesn't mean to say that there isn't capital available for other, more kind of, offline businesses that are solving real problems. It's just not going to attract the kind of global level big capital that's looking for exponential growth and good capital returns.
Right. I hope your question has been answered, Wariru. Thank you, Natalie. That is very elaborative. One last question from an audience, Barasa. He's asking, between idea and person or people, which one do you consider while investing?
Idea versus person.
Yeah.
Person every time. I mean, and it's this point that I made around the first thing that we look at from a risk mitigation perspective is the founder. The founder, their track record, their ability to execute, their value set, their strategy. A great idea with somebody who cannot execute is never going to get off the ground. A founder who has got all these fantastic attributes can take a mediocre idea and turn it into something great. So it's always, it's not even a question of that. It's always person over idea for us.
Thank you, Natalie. That's wonderful to hear. You can go, Modesta.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, you've mentioned a founder being a key attribute or a key element when it comes to making an investment decision. What are your other 3 non-negotiables when it comes to investing in a business?
I wouldn't say we have non-negotiables, but the mandate of the fund will put us into a certain box, into a certain stream. So the fund is, it's this point that that I made around growth. We're looking for businesses that can scale and scale exponentially and scale beyond the borders of that country. So that for us, I'm not going to say it's a non-negotiable, but that is important. We need to be able to see that in a business that it's scalable and that it can scale beyond just the country that it's in. So that the product or the service that company is producing can scale across the continent, or certainly into other parts of the market, and that business can become scalable and big over time. The other part, again, is part of the mandate of the fund, is we're looking for businesses that are more capital light, that are more kind of SaaS type models rather than very heavy capital expenditure. That doesn't mean to say that that's not a good investment strategy. It's just not one that our fund will look at. So for example, if you're building big data centers or a big kind of solar to home projects, those are all really good investments and really good ideas, and there are lots of funds that invest in that. That's not something that we would invest in, but certainly for us it comes back to the first point, which is around the founder and around the governance of the business. So a non-negotiable for us would absolutely be if the business is employed in dodgy activities, whether it's bribery and corruption or whatever that is. We just wouldn't go anywhere near a business like that. But that would have started with the founder, because if you're investing alongside a founder that has the same value set as you do, they're not going to be employed in that kind of stuff anyway. So there's a whole lot of ESG and compliance, absolute no-go zones for us, non-negotiables that we will not touch. But again, as I said, if you're aligned with the founder, they wouldn't be engaged in those practices anyway. But it is something that we do check and we do diligence going into the businesses.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There's a popular saying in the venture world that goes, hardware is hard. So having to put money in a hardware business as opposed to a SaaS, it takes a lot of conviction, because there's a lot of friction that comes with a hardware. The scalability becomes difficult at times. You'll find that they have to go through lots of regulations for them to even be able to do whatever they're doing. So I definitely relate and I can agree with that completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it doesn't mean that, the flip side of that is, because it's hard, if you get it right, then you've got a very nice moat around you. So you've then got a competitive advantage, because other competitors will look at that and go, oh, that's hard, I don't want to be doing that, and we'll go somewhere else, right? So you've got, if you push through and you are able to get that business model right, you then have a very defendable moat around you. and can make some, very good capital returns and make a real difference, within the sector that you're operating in. And there are, as I said, there are lots of funds out there that are very much supporting, those types of investments, and they're making decent returns out of it. But, they specialized in that, and they focused on that, and they know what they're doing. And, it's a hard doesn't always mean no, it just means it's hard. And therefore, there's benefits that come with that as well.
All right. So probably a quick one for you. It should a quick response would be important. You don't have to overthink it. So if you had a founder with a first time founder in hardware, would you invest or would you not invest?
We would not.
Founder.
Yeah, we would not invest because it's not part of the mandate of our fund. So as Norrsken22, we wouldn't invest. But that doesn't mean to say that somebody else wouldn't. And there's lots of investors out there who have got different mandates. Some do early stage, some do hardware, some do deep tech, some do, SaaS. I mean, all of us have got a certain investment mandate that we, that we work to. And mandates come out of people's experience. Whatever your work experience has been historically. So, you'll focus on what's good for, what you understand. And where you can be helpful, but that doesn't mean to say that somebody else, down the road, they'll have a different strategy and they might invest in a business like that.
All right. Probably a final question from me. Do you think there are enough early stage funds in Africa, in your opinion?
That's a good question, actually. I suppose it's. You can always do with more funding, right? I mean, if we have a look at the percentage of capital that Africa gets as a percentage of the capital, around the world, it's still very, very, very low. So if you just have a look at that, the answer is no. I mean, then I think we should, there's definitely a capacity for more funds on the continent to support entrepreneurs. And I think, to the question that was asked earlier, funds that have a different mandate. Funds that have different mandates is good because, to my point, you might have a fund over here that focuses on hardware. You might have a fund over here that focuses, like we do, on more SaaS type models, but later stage. You'll need a fund that focuses more on kind of local businesses that are solving local problems and that are more, more contained to that area. So every, I think, if funds are going to come in, it's looking where the need is and trying to plug that gap rather than trying to do a Me Too, because Me Too is not really going to help, entrepreneurs that are kind of looking for capital and they can't find a home for it. So really trying to see where you can plug a gap in the ecosystem is where, I think it's helpful for funds to come into. And, that's how we also landed on our strategy, because we could see very much that there was a gap at that, later stage of investing for funds, for funds that are Africa based. There weren't many of those, and hence the reason why we came into that gap.
Yeah. All right. I'm busy taking notes here because I feel like this has become more of a masterclass, but really grateful for your nuggets, Natalie.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure.
So Natalie, even as we wind down, unfortunately, time is not on our side. We're almost done with today's session. One question is, how can we support women in emerging roles in the VC industry?
Yeah, Victoria, I think there is, there's, what I speak about quite often is, creating platforms like this or similar platforms to this, where certainly women can collaborate, but also men. It doesn't have to be just really good, because men can support women as well. But I think there's just really, because I think often when you're a founder, it can be a very lonely journey. You're kind of you're at the top of the food chain, or you're having to you're the CEO, you're the CFO, you're the moderator, you're the chief bottle washer. You're everything, right? You're having to do everything, and people that you employ look to you for answers often, and for vision and strategy. So it can be a very lonely place, and I think just creating networks and collaboration opportunities for people to be able to talk about that and be able to lean on each other and exchange ideas and views, etc. Is, I think, super helpful. I mean, I think that is where I've just seen it, within my network, how we support each other and, talk through issues and how have you done this, etc. Because, I think there's, a kind of a culture of, trying to hold on to your business and, well, I'm going to, kind of see how I can do better and push the competition out. It's my personal view is if I'm building a business here and my a competitor's building a business here and a competitor's building a business here, potential better idea is that you collaborate and create one big business where you're all working together, and then you can push out, kind of international competition, etc. And, you can capacitate the organization better because it's bigger, etc. So I think just thinking beyond just that kind of, you're in a rut having to try and do your thing is really thinking about how you can collaborate beyond just your own business. I think that's, and just kind of lift your head up and talk to others. It can be helpful. I know often networking, I know the word networking feels like everybody kind of rolls their eyes like, I don't have time for this. But, I think I'm going to, instead of networking, I'm going to use the word collaborate to really, exchange ideas in a meaningful way. I think can really help, to create that, a system of support around you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Natalie. So what I'm getting from you is just don't work in a silo. Get to collaborate with people, get your head out there, and just listen and learn from other people as well. Right? Okay. Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm sure everyone in this call has been able to get something from you, and we're so happy that you came today. So I'm going to give you a minute to say something as we end, and then we can close.
Sure. So before I do, I see that there is a question in the question box from Hope. She's asked about how a non-technical person lawyer can break into PE. So there is definitely legal. There is everything we do has got a legal component to it. You've got sale and purchase agreements. You've got compliance bits and pieces that you have to do. There's non-disclosure agreements. There's data protection. There's privacy. There's a whole lot of stuff that has got a legal element to it. So being a lawyer within the private equity industry is something that you absolutely can do. So I think if you're wanting to kind of break into it, is to really, whichever law firm you're with, if you can get yourself into the team that works with private equity, and then eventually at some point move into a private equity business where you are providing them with legal support. It is quite difficult to break into the investment side of private equity if you don't have a financial background. I mean, that is hard. So generally people who work in finance, in private equity or venture capital on the investment side have got some kind of finance degree or business degree behind them. But that doesn't mean to say that you're excluded from the industry. I mean, that legal component is probably one of the most important components of private equity. So yeah, I just wanted to just answer that question because I just saw it hovering in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Victoria, I think there's I think at any point in someone's career, and particularly if you're a founder, there's always going to be times when, where it can be quite lonely and quite, daunting to kind of push through. And I think in that moment, you just have to kind of, think through, lift your eyes up and, think bigger and just kind of push through. People need to believe in themselves and not try and get validation from the outside world. I mean, I think, a lot of the time people look for that validation and you don't need it. You need to just believe in yourself and push through. However, saying that, I do think, having conversations with people and this point around collaboration and networks, and I don't mean networks for network's sake. I mean, it's not about sitting, on a Friday afternoon and having a chit chat. It's networks with real purpose and real meaning can be super helpful from a supportive perspective. Particularly if you're starting out, particularly if you're kind of doing something that you've never done before, really kind of being deliberate in the way that you network and connect and collaborate. That's how frankly, I got into what I'm doing. You know, I mean, I spent a lot of time trawling, you know, the internet, stalking people on LinkedIn, you know, going to conferences, making, you know, a deliberate beeline for the coffee machine because I saw somebody there that I wanted to speak to. You know, that kind of, you know, block and tackling and you know, being deliberate about how you network, I think is something, and collaborate, I think is something that I would really recommend people to do. You know, because I think it can grow your ecosystem and your world a lot quicker if you do that.
Right. Thank you so much, Natalie, for those wise words. And thank you so much to the audience. Thank you for your participation today.